On the heels of last week's profound account of the woman at the well, the Church gives us today one of the most powerful stories in all the Gospels, the healing of the man born blind. Last week, we considered Julio Romano de Torres' haunting painting of the Samaritan woman at the well. Well, this week, to help us enter this gospel more deeply, I'd like us to look through the eyes of the great 17th century Spanish painter El Greco and his dramatic work, Christ Healing the Blind, the subject of today's gospel. El Greco's paintings are unmistakable and unique. His figures are elongated as if stretched toward heaven. Light and shadow swirl with intensity. Nothing is calm or sentimental. Everything is charged with spiritual urgency. And that is fitting for today's gospel. At the center of El Greco's painting stands Christ, his arm extended, his hand reaching toward the blind man, not timidly, not hesitantly, but decisively. Christ is the source of light in the scene, and everyone else in the painting is arranged in relation to him, some leaning in, some recoiling, some uncertain, and some resistant. The blind man himself is low to the ground, vulnerable, dependent. Unlike the other gospel story of the blind Bartimaeus, he doesn't call out, he doesn't beg Jesus to heal him, he doesn't reach for Jesus first. Rather, Jesus reaches for him. And that detail matters. In John's gospel, this man never asked to be healed. Jesus sees him first. It is Jesus who notices him. It is Jesus who acts. Grace always begins with God. It is the disciples, however, who want an immediate explanation. Rabbi, who sinned? They think that someone must be to blame. Someone must deserve this darkness. But Jesus refutes that way of thinking. This isn't about punishment or fault-finding or sin. This is about revelation. This is about grace. This is about what happens when the light of God enters a human life. El Greco captures that tension beautifully. Surrounding Christ are various onlookers, faces marked by curiosity or suspicion or even hostility. Some are open to what they are witnessing. Others are already closing themselves off. And that becomes the heart of the gospel. The man receives his sight, but the story is not really about physical blindness. It's about spiritual vision. The man who was blind grows steadily clearer, braver, and more truthful as the story unfolds. He begins with very little understanding. The man called Jesus, he says. And then later, he is a prophet. And finally, when he encounters Jesus again, he is able to say, Lord, I believe. Light, understanding, grace grows naturally. Meanwhile, the religious authorities, those who are certain they see clearly, grow increasingly blind. Their vision narrows, their hearts hardened. They interrogate, accuse, dismiss, and ridicule. The more evidence they are given, the less they are willing to see. El Greco often paints figures with exaggerated eyes that are wide, searching, unsettled. In this painting, many eyes are open, but only some of them are truly seeing. That is the uncomfortable truth of this gospel. It is possible to have perfect eyesight and still live in darkness. And it is possible to begin in blindness and arrive at faith. Lent is the season when the Church gently asks us, Where are we still blind? What do we refuse to see about ourselves, about others, about God? Jesus heals this man using mud, earth mixed with saliva, and sends him to wash. It is a slow, messy, physical process. Real healing is usually messy. Conversion is rarely instantaneous. Vision comes through obedience, trust, and humility. El Greco's characteristic swirling movement reminds us that encountering Christ is never static. Once the light of Christ enters, everything shifts, everything changes. Relationships change, priorities change, courage is demanded, and we are changed. Notice that the healed man is not praised by the authorities, he's not rewarded. Rather, he's cast out. And it is there in rejection that Jesus finds him again. And I think that may be the most consoling moment of this gospel, and perhaps the most consoling message to us today, given the unsettling times in which we live. Jesus does not abandon those who suffer for telling the truth. He seeks them out. He stands before them once more and asks the most important question of all, do you believe? And when the man born blind says yes, he truly sees, not just with his eyes, but more profoundly with his very soul. El Greco's painting leaves us with a choice. Will we stand in the light, even when it unsettles us, or will we cling to familiar darkness because it feels safer? Christ reaches toward us as surely as he reached toward that blind man. Look at El Greco's magnificent painting. His hand is extended. His light is offered to us. The only question is whether or not we are willing to see.